Have you ever trusted your own child, only to discover they were secretly planning your death? That was my reality. At 71 years old, I thought moving into my daughter's home would keep me safe after a heart attack. Instead, one cold February night, I overheard my son-in-law telling her to get rid of the old man so they could sell my house and pay off their debts. I ran into the darkness with nothing but a worn coat, an old recorder, and the will to survive. For weeks I played the frail father while secretly gathering proof. And the night they finally slipped poison into my medication, I pressed a hidden button, summoning the police to storm the house and catch them red-handed. They thought I was helpless. They thought my age made me easy prey. But they forgot one thing: even in old age, dignity is worth fighting for. Stay with me, because this isn't just a story of betrayal. It's the story of how I turned fear into freedom. My name is Arthur Beckett. I've lived my entire life in Burlington, Vermont, built cabinets and porches with my hands, and spent 47 years married to a woman named Clara, who loved roses and could make a pie crust so thin it practically sang in the oven. Clara's been gone 3 years now. Cancer took her. And when she left, half of me left too. After my first heart attack, my daughter Diana insisted I move into her home. "Dad, you can't be alone anymore," she said with that mix of professional firmness only a nurse can manage. Her husband Mark, a truck driver with broad shoulders and little patience, nodded in agreement. "It's safer this way," he added. Safer. That word turned bitter in my mouth later. They gave me a small room that used to be Mark's office. Even after fresh paint, I could still smell the old tobacco embedded in the walls. The bed creaked like it was protesting my presence. Every night I lay down there, I felt less like a father and more like an unwanted guest. That night, it was the sound of my own thirst that saved me. I woke around 2 a.m, chest aching the way it sometimes does when the cold creeps too deep into my bones. I slipped on the slippers my grandson had given me last Christmas, soles already peeling apart, and shuffled down the hallway toward the kitchen. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that hums with secrets. Only the clock ticked, only the refrigerator whispered. Then I heard them voices from the living room. Mark's deep growl, Diana's weary tone. "We can't keep this up," Mark said. "The bank's warned us again. One more missed payment, and they'll start proceedings." "I know," Diana answered, tired. "But what do you expect me to do? I'm already working double shifts." Mark's voice hardened. "Your father's old place is the solution. We sell it. Wipe out the debt." A pause. Then Diana's voice shaky. "That house is all he has left, Mark. You know he won't agree. He'd agree if he weren't so damn stubborn. And if he doesn't..." His tone dropped lower, colder. "There are ways to hasten the inevitable. He's sick, Di. One bad attack and it's over. No questions asked." My breath caught in my throat. I pressed myself against the kitchen doorway, every nerve straining to hear. "Mark, that's my father," Diana whispered. But there wasn't shock in her voice, just exhaustion. "You're a nurse," Mark pushed. "You know what to use, something to mimic a heart attack. He'll go in his sleep, peaceful, and we can move on. Otherwise, we lose everything." The blood roared in my ears. My own daughter. Agreeing, even if reluctantly, to a plan that ended with me in the ground. I stood there, frozen, one hand clutching the counter. For years, I thought my greatest fear was dying alone. That night, I realized something worse: dying while still living under my daughter's roof, betrayed by the very blood I'd once carried in my arms. I stumbled back to my room, heart pounding so hard, I thought it might give them what they wanted right then. My eyes darted to the little gym bag in the closet. Inside, I shoved a sweater, socks, my documents, and an envelope of cash I'd tucked away for a rainy day. Clara used to tease me about being too cautious. Well, the storm had arrived. My fingers trembled as I pulled on my coat. The window creaked when I pried it open. February air slapped me in the face, sharp as a knife, but it was freedom. I climbed out, knees screaming, heart hammering, but every step into that frozen night was a step away from the death they planned for me. The streetlights painted yellow circles on the snow-dusted pavement. Each one felt like a spotlight exposing me, the old man running from his own child. But no one looked. Burlington slept. I walked toward the bus line, toward anywhere but that house, and as the cold air burned my lungs, one thought pulsed in my mind. They see me as a burden, but I am not done yet. I will not let them write my ending. Tell me where you're watching from, your city, your state, or even your country. I'd love to know how far my story travels. The cold cut through me like a blade as I walked. My slippers soaked through almost instantly, and the Vermont wind showed no mercy. My breath puffed out in small white clouds, and each step reminded me of how fragile my knees had become. Yet that night, fear gave me more strength than pride ever had. The bus stop was 3 blocks away. I sat on the frozen bench, clutching my bag like a lifeline. My fingers shook so badly, I could hardly fish out a couple of bills for the first bus of the morning. The young man waiting there with headphones didn't even glance at me. Maybe that was better. An old man trembling and out of place in the dead of night, just another ghost in a town that had forgotten him. When the bus finally groaned to a halt, I climbed aboard and collapsed into the seat behind the driver. The ride was short, but long enough for my mind to spiral. I thought of Clara. She would have told me to breathe, to steady myself. She always believed that even the darkest nights could be survived with a little patience. But she wasn't here. Only her memory tugging at me like a thread. By dawn, I found myself outside an old white clapboard house on Maple Street. The paint was peeling the porch, sagging, but I knew it well. It belonged to Gerald Mason, my neighbor of nearly 40 years. Retired engineer, widower, and one of the few men I could still call a friend. I stood there shivering, debating whether to knock. What do you say when you've just fled your daughter's house in fear of your life? Good morning, old friend. My own child is planning my murder. Before I could decide, the front door creaked open. Gerald stepped out in his flannel robe, holding a mug of coffee, eyes squinting at me. His silver hair was sticking up in every direction. "Arthur," he said slowly, as if doubting his own sight. What on earth? My throat closed. For a moment, no words came. Then I whispered, "I couldn't stay there, Gerald." Something in my voice must have told the truth, because he didn't press. He simply set down his coffee, opened the door wider, and said, "Come in before you freeze to death." Inside, warmth wrapped around me. The smell of cedar logs burning in his fireplace almost made me cry. I sank into his worn armchair, still clutching my bag. Gerald studied me quietly, then brought me a blanket. "Whatever it is," he said gently, "you can tell me when you're ready." And so I did. Halting at first, then faster, the words tumbling out like stones from a broken wall. I told him about Diana, about Mark, about the midnight conversation I'd overheard. I told him about the way they wanted my house, the way they wanted me gone. By the time I finished, Gerald's face was pale and tight. "They'll say you're confused," he muttered. "They'll paint you as senile." "They already have," I said. I told him about the news segment I'd seen earlier with Diana weeping, claiming her poor father wandered away because of dementia. Hearing her say it, that her own father was losing his mind, it had cut deeper than the frostbite gnawing at my toes. For a long moment, silence filled the room. Only the fire crackled. Then Gerald leaned forward. "Arthur, you need proof. Otherwise, it's just your word against theirs. Proof." The word hung heavy in the air. My mind drifted back to my old house, to Clara's study. I remembered the dusty boxes, the broken things I'd never thrown away. Among them, an old cassette recorder. Small, portable, forgotten. The thought sparked like a match in my chest. Maybe I wasn't as powerless as they thought. Maybe I could turn their own words into a weapon. I gripped Gerald's hand. "I'll go back," I said. "I'll find something to make the world believe me." He didn't argue. He only nodded the way men do when they know there's no stopping a storm once it's begun. That morning, wrapped in borrowed blankets, I stared at the frost on Gerald's window and made myself a promise I would not die quietly. Not by their hands. Not by anyone's. Have you ever looked at your own life and realized you had suddenly become a fugitive? Not because you broke the law, but because survival demanded you run. That's how I felt sitting in Gerald Mason's old farmhouse the morning after I fled. He gave me coffee so strong it could wake the dead, and a plate of scrambled eggs that tasted more like mercy than food. I ate in silence, my hands still trembling. Each bite reminded me I was alive. But for how long if Diana and Mark had their way? Gerald leaned back in his chair, studying me. "Arthur, you can't live like this forever. Hiding in my guest room won't stop them. You need something solid. Evidence." I knew he was right. Fear had gotten me out of that house. But proof was the only thing that would keep me free. That afternoon, bundled in Gerald's oversized coat, I took the long walk back to my old home on Pine Grove Lane. The snow crunched underfoot, the trees bare and black against the winter sky. My heart hammered with every step, not just from the cold, but from dread. The house looked the same as always, white siding, dark green shutters, Clara's rose bushes now withered under frost. But it wasn't mine anymore. At least not in practice. My daughter and her husband had turned it into something foreign, something hostile. Still, I had one advantage. Clara had always insisted on hiding a spare key in the little birdhouse nailed to the porch post. She called it insurance for forgetful days. I slid my hand inside, felt the familiar cold metal, and nearly broke down right there. Clara, even from the grave, was still saving me. I slipped inside quietly. The house smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and Mark's cologne, harsh, synthetic. My footsteps echoed against the hardwood too loud in the silence. I went first to my study, or what used to be my study. Boxes were stacked high, my papers shoved into corners, as if my life's work were clutter. I sifted through drawers until I found what I came for: my birth certificate, bank records, Clara's letters tied with ribbon. Proof that I still existed beyond their lies. Then I saw it half buried under a stack of old manuals, my cassette recorder. Small, rectangular, scratched on the edges, but intact. I lifted it like an artifact, my pulse quickening. It had been years since I'd last used it, back when Clara and I recorded little notes for each other. I slipped in a tape-pressed play. The machine whirred a faint crackle, then silence. It worked. That recorder was no longer just a relic. It was hope. I shoved it deep into my bag just as I heard the sound of a key turning in the front door. My stomach dropped. Diana's voice floated through the hall. "Mark, we have to be careful about showing the place. Dad's things are still everywhere. I told you," Mark replied, his voice sharp. "He's not coming back. People already think he's half crazy. We'll get it listed next week." Panic clawed up my throat. I ducked into the hall closet, pulling the door almost shut. Through the slats, I saw them walk past Diana, clutching a folder, Mark carrying a measuring tape. They moved through the rooms, talking about square footage, about renovations, about money. Every word stabbed me. My daughter, my only child, talking about my home like I was already buried. I pressed my hand against the recorder in my bag. Soon, I thought. Soon their own voices would betray them. They lingered for what felt like an eternity. At one point, Diana paused outside the closet. I held my breath until my chest ached. Then she moved on, distracted by Mark's endless calculations. When they finally left, slamming the door behind them, I stayed hidden another 5 minutes, afraid to trust the silence. Only when I stepped back into the icy air did I let myself breathe again. My legs shook, my heart raced, but my hands clutched both the documents and the recorder. I wasn't just a fugitive anymore. I was a man with a weapon. Their words would become my salvation. When I stepped back into Gerald's farmhouse with that old cassette recorder in my bag, I felt like I was carrying a loaded gun. Not in the sense of violence, but in the sense of power. For the first time since that awful night, I had a tool. Gerald eyed the bag as I set it down. "Find what you needed." I unzipped it just enough to reveal the recorder. His eyes widened. "Does it still work?" "It does," I said, my voice low. "And if I can catch them talking like they did the other night, no one will ever call me senile again." We tested it right there on his kitchen table. The buttons clicked the way they used to, the tape whirred, and when Gerald spoke into it, "Test, test, 1, 2, we heard his voice crackle back on playback. Faint, but clear. Proof that the machine could still tell the truth. That night I made my decision. I would go back not to live, but to spy. I'd act confused, lost, repentant. I'd tell Diana I didn't remember where I'd been, that I'd wandered. It would make me look weaker, yes, but weakness has its own kind of camouflage. The next morning, bundled in Gerald's coat again, I shuffled back to my daughter's door. My heart beat like a drum when she opened it. Her eyes went wide, then narrowed. "Dad, where have you been?" I hunched my shoulders, letting my face sag. I don't remember, Di. I just woke up outside." For a long moment, she studied me. Then her shoulders dropped. She reached out, pulled me in, muttering, "You scared me half to death." But behind her, Mark just watched. His eyes were sharp, calculating. If Diana saw a frail old man, Mark saw something else, a potential problem. That evening, while they argued in the kitchen about bills and bank notices, I slipped into my room and pulled the recorder from under my pillow. With trembling fingers, I taped it inside my vest pocket. The red light glowed faintly through the fabric. I shuffled back into the hallway, pretending to be confused, leaning on the wall for support. Their voices carried down the hall. "We don't have much time," Mark was saying. "The bank wants another payment next week." I know, Diana sighed. "But Dad's back now. We can't just." Mark cut her off, voice low and harsh. "You're a nurse, Di. You know how easy it would be. 1 pill. It looks natural. Done." My stomach lurched, but I forced my feet to keep moving closer so the recorder could catch every word. Then the floor betrayed me. A board creaked under my weight. Both voices stopped. "Dad," Diana called. "Is that you?" I froze, my heart thundering. I considered retreating, but retreat would look suspicious. So I stepped into the doorway, letting my hands tremble. "Just looking for some water," I mumbled. Her expression softened. Mark's didn't. His eyes lingered on me too long, then flicked toward my chest, where if he looked closely, he might see the faintest red glow through the fabric. I turned quickly, shuffling back toward my room, praying he hadn't noticed. Inside, I shut the door, pressed my back against it, and only then dared to breathe. When I played the tape later in secret, the voices were muffled but clear enough. Mark's words, "One pill, it looks natural," hissed through the speaker like venom. I nearly wept at the sound. It wasn't enough yet, but it was a beginning. That night, I lay awake on the narrow bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to every creak of the house. For the first time, I wasn't just surviving. I was fighting back. Quietly, carefully, with nothing more than a relic of the past and the stubborn will of a man who refused to be erased. When I woke the next morning, the weight of the little recorder pressed against my ribs like a secret heartbeat. I'd tucked it into the lining of my vest, stitched in by Gerald's steady old hands the night before. If Diana and Mark wanted to see a fragile old man drifting into confusion, then that's exactly who I would let them see. It was a strange sort of theater, acting weak, shuffling slower, letting my voice trail off like I couldn't keep track of a sentence. The kind of behavior that made Diana sigh with pity and Mark smirk with impatience. Inside, though, my mind was sharper than ever, counting every word, every glance, every chance to capture the truth on tape. At breakfast, Diana placed my pill box on the table, her nurse's habit showing in the neat compartments, labeled with days of the week. But I noticed one small addition, an extra capsule tucked in with my morning heart pill. "Doctor adjusted your prescription," she said quickly, avoiding my eyes. My hands trembled, not entirely from acting. "Oh, thank you, Di," I murmured, slipping the capsule into my pocket instead of swallowing it. She didn't notice. Or maybe she didn't want to. Mark slammed his coffee mug down hard enough to make the table rattle. The bank called again. "They're not waiting." Diana rubbed her temples. "I'll handle it, just give me time." "You've been saying that for weeks," he snapped. Then lower, "If your father were gone, this would already be over." I lowered my gaze, pretending to be lost in thought, but inside I was praying the recorder caught every poisonous word. That afternoon, while Diana was at her shift and Mark dozed in front of the TV, I slipped into the bathroom, locked the door, and rewound the tape. My hands shook as Mark's voice hissed back at me. "If your father were gone, this would already be over." It was there. Clear. Chilling. Proof. But proof doesn't stop a heart from failing. That evening, as I bent to pick up a dropped spoon, a sharp pain knifed through my chest. The world tilted, the floor rushed up, and suddenly I was gasping like a fish on dry land. Diana's voice echoed from the kitchen. "Dad, Dad." I tried to wave her off, but my arm felt like lead. Darkness crept in around the edges of my vision. I heard her call Mark. Heard his footsteps, heard the panic in her voice, real panic this time, not performance. "Call an ambulance," she shouted. The ride to the hospital was a blur of sirens and cold air. Nurses swarmed, machines beeped, and I clung to consciousness by threads. In that haze, I saw Clara's face. Not as she looked at the end, frail and fading, but as she was in her prime, smiling, telling me to hold on. When I woke in a sterile white room hours later, Gerald was sitting at my bedside, his broad hands folded in his lap. Relief softened his lined face. "You gave us a scare, old friend," he said quietly. On the nightstand sat my bag. He had it, which meant the recorder was safe. "Did it work?" I croaked. Gerald nodded, his eyes fierce. "Nathan's already listened. The lawyer says it's enough to start building a case, but we'll need more, and the police will need to be brought in." I closed my eyes, exhausted but determined. Even as my body betrayed me, my will sharpened. They wanted me to fade quietly. Instead, I would shine a light on every shadow they had cast. The hospital smell clung to me, bleach, latex, and something faintly metallic like old pennies. I lay there in the stiff bed, heart still sore from the attack, when the door opened and Gerald stepped in. Beside him was a tall man in a gray suit carrying a leather briefcase, and behind them a shorter fellow with the kind of sharp eyes that seemed to take in every corner of the room. Arthur. Gerald said, his voice steady. "This is Nathan Crowley, a lawyer friend of mine. And this is Detective Samuel Hayes from the Burlington Police. They're here to listen." I pushed myself up, slowly wincing. Listen to what Gerald reached into his coat and pulled out my old cassette recorder. He set it on the tray table, pressed play, and Mark's voice filled the sterile room. "If your father were gone, this would already be over." The sound was faint, scratchy, but it was enough. Nathan leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "That's clear intent. And paired with the fact you nearly collapsed from a heart episode, it paints a very ugly picture." Detective Hayes nodded grimly. "But we'll need more. Juries like clarity, Arthur. They like smoking guns, not whispers." I swallowed hard. "So how do we get clarity?" Hayes's sharp eyes fixed on me. "You act like nothing's wrong. You go back. Let them try again. But this time we'll be watching." The thought of returning to Diana and Mark's house sent a chill straight through me. To sit at their table, eat their food, take their pills, knowing what they intended. It felt like volunteering for my own funeral. Nathan must have seen the fear on my face. He leaned closer. "You won't be alone. We'll wire the house. Hidden cameras, microphones, the works. We'll also give you an emergency transmitter, a button you keep on you at all times. One press and officers will be at the door in under a minute." Gerald laid a heavy hand on my shoulder. "Arthur, I know it's asking a lot. But if you don't stand firm now, they'll keep circling until they get what they want. And I refuse to see you erased like that." I thought of Clara, of the home she and I built, board by board, rows by rows, of the nights she would hum to herself while I worked in the shop. That house was not just walls and windows. It was memory, dignity, the life we'd made. And my daughter wanted to sell it off like scrap. I clenched my fists, frail though they were. "All right," I whispered. "I'll go back." Nathan outlined the plan carefully. "When you return, act as if the hospital rattled you. Let them believe you're weaker. Don't resist if they try to change your medication. But don't take anything they give you. We'll switch the pills for dummies. And whatever you do, keep the recorder running. We'll collect enough to build a case airtight." Detective Hayes slid a small black device across the tray table. "This is your lifeline. One click and we come in. Don't hesitate, Arthur. Your safety comes first." I picked it up, the button light blinking softly, and felt the weight of my own survival resting in something so small. That night alone in the hospital bed, I stared at the ceiling. The fear was real, but so was the resolve. They thought I was frail, helpless, half gone. They thought wrong. I would go back into the wolf's den, but this time the wolves wouldn't know the forest was full of hunters. If you believe elders deserve respect and dignity, subscribe to Brian's story and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support reminds me I'm not alone in this fight. The February wind cut through my coat as Gerald pulled his old pickup to the curb. The street was quiet, lined with maples stripped bare for winter. At the end of the block, I could see my daughter's house glowing with the soft yellow light of the porch lamp. It should have looked like home. Instead, it looked like a stage where I was about to perform the most dangerous role of my life. "Remember," Gerald said, gripping the wheel, "stay small, stay frail. Let them think you're slipping." I patted the inside of my vest where the recorder rested, sewn into a hidden pocket. The tiny button in my other pocket, the police lifeline, felt like a burning coal against my palm. "I know," I whispered. "This isn't about playing hero. It's about staying alive." Gerald's eyes softened. "Clara would be proud of you." That name nearly undid me. Clara, my wife, my anchor, gone 3 winters now. I took a breath and pushed the door open. The cold bit my lungs, but it also braced me. I shuffled up the walkway, slowly letting my shoulders sag, my steps drag. An old man coming home from the hospital, nothing more. The door opened before I knocked. Diana stood there, her blonde hair pulled back, the nurse's mask of concern perfectly painted on her face. "Dad," she exclaimed, eyes glistening. "You're finally home." She hugged me, her arms light, but her grip firm, like she was measuring my fragility. I hugged back weakly, forcing myself not to stiffen. Mark appeared behind her, his frame filling the doorway. He smiled, but his eyes were like glass, cold, reflective, nothing behind them. "Arthur," he said warmly. "Good to see you back on your feet." "Barely," I croaked, lowering my eyes. "The doctors say I should rest. I'm not sure how much strength I've got left." Mark chuckled softly. "Well, we'll make sure you get all the care you need." His hand landed on my shoulder. It felt like a claim, not comfort. Inside the house smelled of lavender candles, but beneath it I caught the faint odor of bleach. The living room looked immaculate, cushions, plumped coffee table polished. Too perfect, too staged, as though they were preparing for someone to inspect it. Maybe they already were, maybe a realtor had walked through. "Come sit," Diana said, guiding me to the recliner by the window. A blanket waited there, folded neatly. She draped it over my knees, as though I were a child. I let her fuss. Let her believe I had surrendered. She brought me tea, chamomile steam curling into the air. I cradled the cup in both hands, pretending my fingers were too weak to steady it. Mark sat across from me, watching. Always watching. "You gave us quite a scare," he said, "walking out into the cold like that. We thought we'd lost you." I looked down into the tea, my reflection rippling. Sometimes I don't know what I'm doing anymore. Maybe the doctors are right. Diana leaned closer, her hand brushing mine. "It's okay, Dad. You don't have to worry about anything. Just rest. Let us take care of you." I nodded, swallowing the bitterness rising in my throat. Take care of me. I knew what those words meant, but I smiled faintly and whispered, "Thank you." Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Mark's lips curl into the ghost of a grin. That night, lying in the guest room they had prepared for me, I turned on the recorder before closing my eyes. Their voices carried faintly through the walls, murmurs, whispers I couldn't yet make out. But I knew one thing: the trap was set. And I was the bait. The house creaked the way only a house can when it's holding secrets. I lay in the narrow guest bed, the recorder humming faintly beneath my vest, its red light hidden from sight. My breathing was slow, deliberate, the rhythm of a man too tired to stay awake. But my ears were sharpened like knives. Through the thin wall, voices drifted, first low, then rising. Mark's tone was clipped, restless. Diana's was hesitant, a whisper pulled tight with guilt. "You said he was weak," Mark muttered. "But look at him. He's back from the hospital, still standing." "We can't wait forever, Diana. The bank won't wait forever." There was a long silence, the kind that carries more weight than words. I pictured Diana wringing her hands the way she did as a girl when she lied about breaking a vase. Finally, she spoke, her voice trembling. "I know. But if anyone suspects, if the doctors question it, no one will." Mark cut in sharper now. "You're a nurse with 20 years under your belt. Who would doubt you, an old man with a heart condition suddenly passing in his sleep? That's natural. That's expected." My own pulse throbbed against my temples, loud in my ears. To hear my death spoken of as casually as one might discuss taking out the trash, it hollowed me out. Diana's whisper quavered. "He's still my father, Mark. Then act like a daughter and save this family," he hissed. "Unless you want Paige and Tyler to lose their rooms, their school, everything. Do you want that? Or do you want him to slip away peacefully?" I could almost hear her resolve cracking like thin ice. My chest tightened, not from my heart this time, but from the grief of it. My little girl caught between debt and duty, letting greed steer her compass. She finally said it. Quiet, resigned. "All right, but it has to be slow, gradual. If his condition declines over days, no one will ask questions." Mark exhaled, satisfied. "Good. Then we'll start tomorrow. Slip the dose in with his evening pills, just enough to weaken him. By next week he'll be gone, and we'll be free." The room spun, though I was lying still. I pressed a trembling hand against my chest, grounding myself. They had spoken the words. They had agreed. And the tape now carried their truth. I wanted to storm into that room to shout, "I heard you, I know what you're planning," but anger would have been suicide. Instead, I lay still, forcing myself to breathe evenly, to play the part of the feeble old man already halfway gone. From the hallway, footsteps approached. My door creaked open a fraction. I kept my eyes shut, body slack, breath shallow. Diana peeked in her silhouette, framed in the dim hall light. She lingered, maybe searching my face for suspicion. Finally, the door clicked shut. When I was certain they were asleep, I sat up slowly, my bones groaning in protest. I reached beneath my vest, fingers brushing the warm metal of the recorder. Its tiny cassette whirred, capturing every word that had just sealed their fate. I whispered to the darkness, to Clara, to myself. They think I'm finished. But this old man isn't done yet. Morning came gray and brittle. Frost feathered the window glass in my guest room, and for a moment I wondered if I'd dreamed the night before. But then my hand found the recorder under my vest, and the weight of it told me the truth. Every poisoned word was safe on tape. At breakfast, Diana hovered like a dutiful daughter. She buttered my toast, poured my tea, and placed a neat row of pills by my plate. Among the familiar capsules sat a small white one, innocuous, almost delicate, like a snowflake. But I knew better. "Dad," she said gently, "remember to take all of them." The doctor insisted. I nodded, feigning confusion. "All of them, yes." "Of course." I palmed the white pill with the practiced clumsiness of an old man slipping it into my napkin. The rest went down with water. She smiled, satisfied. Mark across the table sipped his coffee and watched, always watching. Inside my vest, the recorder was already running. The police had installed their hidden cameras and microphones 2 days earlier, while Diana worked and Mark drove the kids to school. I was wired, the house was wired, and now the stage was set. After breakfast, I shuffled to the recliner by the window blanket across my knees. I let my head droop forward, let my breathing slow the image of a man fading. From the kitchen came their voices, carried soft but steady. "Did he swallow it?" Mark's question. "Yes," Diana replied. "All of them. And now we wait," she said, her tone flat. "It'll weaken him gradually. No one will suspect." The microphone hidden in the light fixture caught every syllable. My fingers twitched in my lap. "Hold steady, Arthur. Just a little longer." Hours dragged by. My heart raced with each tick of the clock, though outwardly I looked half asleep. At one point, Diana checked on me, brushing my forehead with her cool nurse's hand. "How are you feeling, Dad?" she asked sweetly. "Tired," I croaked. "So very tired." Her eyes flickered relief, satisfaction before she tucked the blanket closer and walked away. That evening, they tried again. Another pill, another glass of water. This time I let it slip beneath my tongue, then spat it quietly into the wastebasket when she left the room. My chest ached not from illness, but from the weight of betrayal pressing down like a stone. By the third day, the police were restless. Detective Hayes checked in through Gerald. "One more clear attempt and we'll move." That night, Mark paced in the kitchen, voice sharp. "He's still breathing fine." "Are you sure you gave the right dose? I'm not stupid," Diana snapped. "It takes time. You wanted slow, remember?" Mark slammed his cup down. "We can't afford time." Another notice from the bank came today. If he doesn't... He caught himself lowering his voice. "If he doesn't go soon, we'll lose everything." There it was. Motive, intent, desperation. I sat in my chair, heart hammering, praying the microphones were catching every syllable. Then I felt the button in my pocket, the lifeline Detective Hayes had given me. My thumb hovered over it, trembling. Not yet, I told myself. One more step. One more shove from them and the trap would close. When Diana entered the living room with the next dose, I took the pills in my palm, staring at her face. She smiled the way she used to when she was 10, bringing me wildflowers from the yard. Except this time her hands carried poison. I raised the glass of water to my lips, and at that exact moment I pressed the button in my pocket. The bait was set. The wolves had taken it, and the hunters were on their way. The pill sat bitter on my tongue, though I hadn't swallowed it. I could feel Diana's eyes watching me, patient, waiting. I lifted the glass of water slowly, forcing my hand to tremble like a man too weak to fight fate. "Good," she murmured. "That's it, Dad. Just rest after this." I nodded faintly, pretending to swallow, then set the glass down. Inside my vest, the recorder whirred. In my pocket, the emergency button blinked silently, its signal already racing through wires and airwaves. Seconds stretched into hours. My heart pounded so loud, I thought they might hear it echoing across the room. Mark entered from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a towel. His eyes swept over me, meek, fragile, compliant. "Well," he said, with a quiet satisfaction, "soon all this worry will be behind us." Diana shot him a warning look. Not here. Not now. But it was too late. The door crashed open with a thunderclap, and the house erupted with voices. Police. Nobody move. Uniformed officers surged in boots, pounding weapons drawn. The living room flooded with blue and red light from the cruisers outside. Diana froze the pill bottle still in her hand. Mark staggered backward, his face blanching, as if he'd already seen the future carved in iron bars. Detective Hayes strode in behind them, his voice clear and commanding. "Mr. Hampton, you're safe. We've got it. Safe." The word rang in my ears like a church bell. Diana's hand trembled, the pills rattling inside their plastic prison. This isn't what it looks like," she stammered. Hayes cut her off. "We have the tapes, Diana. We have the footage. We have your voice discussing doses, your husband's voice pressing for speed. And this." He held up a small evidence bag. One officer had already seized the very pill she'd tried to give me. "Contains enough digoxin to stop a man's heart." Mark's shoulders sagged. "We didn't mean save it for the judge," Hayes snapped. Handcuffs clicked. My daughter, my only child, bowed her head as the steel closed around her wrists. Mark cursed under his breath as two officers shoved him toward the door. Their children weren't home to see it, thank God. And me, I just sat there, the blanket still over my knees, trembling with the weight of it all. Relief, sorrow, fury, it all tangled inside me like a storm. As they led Diana past me, she turned her face just enough for our eyes to meet. For a heartbeat, I saw the little girl who once held my hand crossing the street, who once begged me for just one more story before bed. But that girl was long gone, buried under debts and choices she could never take back. "Dad," she whispered, voice breaking. "I'm sorry." I closed my eyes. I didn't answer. The door slammed behind them, and the house fell quiet again. For the first time in months, I breathed without fear. Weeks later, I stood on the porch of my old home, the one Diana and Mark had nearly killed me to steal. The repairs had begun, new paint on the shutters, roses replanted along the walk, just the way Clara used to like them. Gerald hammered away at the fence, whistling a tune that carried across the yard. The sun dipped low, bathing everything in gold. I leaned on the railing, my heart steady for once, and let the warmth settle into my bones. I was 71 years old, widowed, tired, and far from perfect, but I was still here, still standing, still mine. They thought I was weak. They thought I'd fade quietly, invisible, a burden to be erased. But I proved them wrong. I will live out my days on my own terms, in my own house, by my own rules. And maybe, just maybe, someone hearing this will remember dignity doesn't vanish with age. Sometimes it grows sharper, fiercer, because it's all we have left to defend. If this story moved, you don't forget to subscribe to Brian's Story and share your thoughts below. Have you ever seen dignity tested in old age? Your voice matters here.